Hey guys, Uncle Loz and Auntie Liz here, and we are here to bring you the official list of events for the 2022 World's Strongest Man.
So before we go into the events, it's really important to point out that this year, unlike other years, all athletes in all heats are going to be doing the same events.
I think this is fantastic. Yes. And you know, from a fan's point of view, we can really track across the board who does well in certain events. And with events that are very similar towards the final, it'll give us a good idea on who to really look out for. But first time we've ever seen this, every single heat doing the same events.
So event one of the heats is a loading race, 2 athletes per heat.
Yeah, loading race, very traditional way of starting off World's Strongest Man. The athletes are going to be looking to load, I would guess, about 3 implements. Sometimes it's 4. The distances we're looking at are normally 10 to 12 meters for each implement, and they'll be loading either sandbags, kegs, or perhaps anvils, which will weigh between 100 and 140 kilos. That's kind of standard World's Strongest Man loading. They sometimes throw a few local type looking things into the mix. The athletes don't know for sure what they're loading yet, so they're going to be training on all those different implements, but that's your standard loading event at a World's Strongest Man contest. So
event number 2 of the heats, the first time we're seeing this event at World's Strongest Man, is the deadlift ladder, 2 athletes at a time. We saw it recently at Europe's Strongest Man. Yeah, very recently at Europe's Strongest Man, where they did 300 up to 400 kilos. I believe it's going to be exactly the same. So we're going to have 5 bars and each will go up by 20 kilos. And if we can see, we saw at Europe's Strongest Man, no one managed to pull the 400. I think when it comes to World's Strongest Man, we will. We have some fantastic athletes to look out for, and the deadlift medley will be event number 2. Event number 3 of the heats is the car walk, one of your favourite events, Lozzie. And the first time we've seen it since 2014. Yeah, and I believe they're going to be using a car very similar to they used at OSG and that we see at Europe's Strongest Man, the old Volkswagen Beetle type car with it's almost like a safety bar squat attachment inside. It's very much like a yoke. The only thing with the car walk is you have a little bit more movement where the car kind of rocks forwards and backwards as well as side to side. It's a tough event. I think the guys will be looking forward to doing it though. Getting inside a car, picking it up like you're Fred Flintstone and running down the track as fast as humanly possible. I think weight-wise it's going to be looking at around 1,000 pounds. So challenging, but I still believe we'll see some quick times with this type of weight. The next event is the log lift for reps using the wood and Slater logs. Log for reps, an event we've seen many times at World's Strongest Man. Normally we're looking these days between 150 to 160 kilos, full cleans from the floor. So every single rep has to go back down to the floor, clean the log, press it overhead to a full lockout and then back down to the floor again. That's 1 repetition. It's a tough event. The wooden logs have quite small handle spaces as well, so you can't really put your hands forwards and backwards. The athletes need to make sure they're training with their hands more central, and it's about conditioning. You know, they've got some amazing log lifters for 1 rep, but when it's repetitions, you need the lung capacity and that fitness as well. Event number 5 is very exciting. It's a wrecking ball hold, a brand new event to World's Strongest Man. It's a grip test where athletes are going to be stood in an elevated position with a wrecking ball dangling down, and they're going to be holding onto it with no straps. Yeah, all about grip strength. It's almost a combination of a Hercules hold and a car hold. I think if the athletes are training for either a farmer's walk type lift and hold or a Hercules hold, they'll be in the right ballpark for this type of event. So love it or hate it, the final event, which will only be performed by athletes in 2nd and 3rd place, is the stone off. The setup is going to be the same as last year, so it's going to be a stone run with 3rd place going first, and then the guy in 2nd place simply has to return the stone. If they manage the whole run, then the last stone will have to be done for reps to each other. So the advantage for the 2nd place athlete is they just have to match the 3rd place athlete. If the 3rd place athlete wants to beat 2nd place, they need to do an extra rep. Yeah. Exactly, but the last stone could be as heavy as 210 kilos, so no one wants to be repping that out and then have to go and do the final afterwards. Definitely not. So that's the heats dealt with. Now let's move on to the events for the final. So the first event of the final is the KNAACK Giants Medley, which is going to be a box carry into a super yoke. What's a box carry, Lozzie?
The box carrier is literally a heavy box that they're going to have to carry, and then I'm not sure yet if they're going to have to put it onto the yoke or it's just going to be placed past a certain line. Then they get themselves under a yoke. Again, I think we're going to be looking at around £1,000, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. It's going to be about getting under that weight, picking it up and running as fast as possible across the finish line. This is all about speed and strength.
Event number 2 is going to be a deadlift for reps. Now, we don't know much about it. We think it's going to be standard height, 9 inches.
Yeah, we're looking at a more traditional type deadlift in the final, this time for repetition. So we're going to be, I would guess, around the 350 kilo mark. The athletes are going to strap up, they're allowed straps, suits, and it's literally lift the bar as many times as possible in the time frame allowed.
So event number 3 is the FLINTSTONE barbell for max weight. So the last time we saw this was in one of the qualifying heats in 1997.
So this is an event I have fond memories of. Actually watching Gary Taylor do this in, I believe it was 95. He won the event with around 210 kilos. I think this year we could see some athletes going as high as 500 pounds or 230 kilos. The one stipulation World's Strongest Man has said with this is the athletes can press from the front or from behind the neck. Now, behind the neck is a lot more of a traditional Olympic style movement. Not necessarily an Olympic lift that they do in competition, but a movement that they would do to help their training. It's a very different overhead than we see regularly at World's Strongest Man. Obviously we've got the log in the heats. This is a little bit different, and I honestly have vivid fond memories of watching this event as a kid. Just the Flintstone style weights. It's a cool visual, and it's a different event, and I know a lot of the athletes have been training very, very hard since they heard about it. If you go on Instagram, you can see them all practicing and panicking about this one, and it's one that's going to be hard to predict in terms of who comes out on top. You don't necessarily need to be the biggest log lifter to be the best at this type of event. So I think it's going to be a very interesting one, and an event that could really decide who wins World's Strongest Man this year.
So next up, we have a really traditional World's Strongest Man event. It's a vehicle pull, and this year the athletes are going to be pulling a bus. This is classic World's Strongest Man stuff, and it doesn't necessarily just suit the bigger, taller athletes, does it? A lot of it is technique.
There's a lot of technique involved. It's going to be a vehicle pull with a harness and rope, so the athletes will be able to pull against the rope whilst driving forwards. Lots of leg power, lots of arm power, and good technique. Like you say, we've seen many different vehicle pulls before. Aeroplanes, monster trucks, buses, trucks, you know, you name it. Yeah. If it's pullable, a strongman will try and attach themselves to it and pull it as far as they can. Normally, World's Strongest Man is looking at about a 25-meter course. It's going to be hard and heavy, and it doesn't always suit the bigger guys. The big guys have an advantage, but you look at guys like Mariusz Pudzianowski, excellent truck puller, Mateusz Kieliszkowski, and plenty of others that have done extremely well in the past. Always an important event when it comes to World's Strongest Man.
So the penultimate event of the finals is the Rain Total Body Fuel Power Stairs, an event we haven't seen at World since 2015.
Yeah, I'm excited to see this one back, and if you guys go back to the early 2000s, you will remember Mariusz Pudzianowski being absolutely unbelievable at this type of event. I'm really interested to watch how good the new crop of athletes are at this one. Again, an event we haven't seen too often. We did see it very recently at Europe's Strongest Man, but it's going to be heavier and harder at Worlds this year, and I'm very keen to see who comes out on top.
And finally, the last event of World's Strongest Man is going to be the traditional Atlas stones. More traditional than usual because there is going to be a run-in this year like they used to do.
Yeah, that really adds a different element to it, where the athletes have to carry the lighter stones. Normally it's like 5 meters, 4 meters, 3 meters, 2 meters, 1 meter for the last stone. Having to carry them in that little bit of distance really drains the athletes a little bit more for the last stone. So it won't be quite such a sprint that we may normally see. And if anyone can lift the last stone, they're going to be deserving of calling themselves the World's Strongest Man.
There we have it. What are your initial thoughts, Lozzie?
I really like it. 2 things that I'm really looking forward to. One is that all the athletes do the same events in the heats. It's been a big complaint in the past because where athletes end up being put in different groups, you could end up with one athlete doing a squat, one athlete doing a deadlift, or one athlete doing some kind of overhead, another athlete doing a different type of overhead, whatever it might be. Whereas this, there's none of that complaints. You know, every single athlete has the same events to train for. They know exactly what to expect. And I think it's going to be quite cool that we'll be able to compare results from different groups. That's something I'm going to be really keen to do once it all kicks off. And obviously I'm looking forward to seeing some of these old events being brought back and a couple of new events completely thrown in there as well. Good to see a grip test at World's Strongest Man this year. The FLINTSTONE lift, I'm looking forward to that, and the power stairs as well. So an old favourite coming back. So I think it's going to be a great World's Strongest Man. The athlete lineup is just immense. There's no weak athletes. They are all ridiculously good at a lot of these events, but it's going to come down to who is the most consistent. Who can get through all these events without making a mistake will be the 2022 World's Strongest Man.